morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, The Boxer No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived reality of complex trauma, but I really want to get into the understandings around its mechanisms and how it relates to our day-to-day lives so that you can learn and what you need to be able to make use of the resources you have and to improve the quality of your life. Now in this video, I'm carrying on with how we respond. Continuing on from, the assigned fear states and all the different processes, all the different ecologies that are going on within us when we've gone through particularly complex trauma, particularly pre-verbal and early childhood, where we've been through so many things that have changed fundamentally how we view the world and how we live. Today, one of the processes that naturally happens, whether we're aware of it or not, when we've gone through a significant traumatic event or a series of prolonged significant traumatic events, is everything that we are, everything that we know to do, our abilities, our skill sets, all proved ineffective against what was happening. And that changes us fundamentally inside. That changes us to where we don't trust our ability to be able to do what we need to be able to live in this world, to be able to deal and cope and do everything we need to do. The flow on from this is we tend to narrow our worldview, our engagement, and how we everything that we do, we narrow it down. And dependent upon the resources we have around and the support bases we have around is how narrow that view gets. Now, if you've gone through pre-verbal early childhood or significant trauma, the chances are you have next to no support base. So this view becomes very, very narrow. And it's normal. I'm not saying it's wrong. I have it. Anybody who's gone through significant trauma, we all do it. It is a natural part of, we need to get things to a manageable point. And that manageable point is governed by the structures that we developed to survive, our survival state. The rules that we have created to be able to cope, manage, and do what we need to do from day to day. And that pretty much shapes the entire ecology that we're dealing with. Now, as much as that is normal and as much as that makes sense, there comes a point when we need to start to actually look at that part of our survival state. Because if we're going to find a path out of trauma, that survival state has to change. We need to understand the nature of our survival state. And there are so many components of this. In the next few videos, I'm going to touch on some of the more dominant ones that I've witnessed and seen and how they play out in people and the world around complex trauma. But in this one, I just want to get this process understood as best as possible. When we narrow our worldview, when we narrow the ecologies that we deal with, when we narrow to cope and to manage, we isolate. And as we all know, when we've gone through trauma or traumatic experiences are one of the most isolating factors in our society today. And one of the more common things that I see a lot today is these noise-canceling headphones. Yes, they manage, yes, they help a person cope, but they also remove the ability to change. And that's just one example of many. When we narrow our ecology to the point where we can cope, we also narrow the input of new information. We limit new opportunities because, we actually block the majority of new opportunities because they're perceived as a threat. We completely change how our entire system works. Everything new that comes in has to go through a set of stacked filters engaged by our responses and our threat responses and so forth, that we fundamentally create an island and we isolate it as much as we can with the mindset in the beginning that if I do this now, I can get my feet, I can get back to where I need to be, I can do what I need to do to be able to build a better structure. We try to find the solution to why whatever happened to us happened. And the next video I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this, but that is one of the, it is a natural thing that we do, but it comes at a massive price if we're not aware of it. It is normal, it is natural, it is something we need to do, but we need to be aware that we're doing it. And that's one of the key components in these videos and why I make them is there is so much that we do in every moment behind the scenes that we're just not aware of. And this is one of them. Now, as I said, to bring order to the chaos that's going on around us, we narrow the ecology that we work with. And we create filters, we create rules, we create things that we need to cope. And this is where having an understanding of what our rules are, what we do to cope, is very threatening but very handy to have. Like, I know I've spent years admitting to myself the habitual patterns that I've created to survive. Of how, you know, when you walk into a place, you scan the room, you assess everybody that's in there, you have the hypervigilance and the hyper-awareness. You never sit with your back exposed. You always watch people, you have difficulty engaging because of that. Everything goes through these filters of assessment. And it puts people on the back foot. It does make people wary, and it does isolate. But I'm aware of it so that when I do that, I create additional ways of assessing. I walk in, I scan the room, and go, yeah, okay, there is no threat in here. So I consciously do my best to stop scanning the room and focus on, yes, I know I do this, I need to change. I need to make one extra step each interaction to teach my nervous system that the past is the past. Yes, I cannot guarantee that that threat won't happen, but the past is the past. And I need to teach myself each step of the way to do that one little step more. Because as I said, the main price tag of when we narrow our worldview is we isolate, and we become very isolated. And when you go through decades of this, we see it in our world around us. We become very, very alone. And so much of our life passes by because of it. Unfortunately, this society and this world doesn't see the impact of trauma because it actively chooses not to, especially in the Western world. So it comes upon ourselves to help ourselves. And again, this is why I'm making these videos. By helping ourselves, by being aware of what we do to protect ourselves, being aware of the sentences that we say to reinforce how we protect ourselves, how we feed and structure our survival state, how we narrow our coping and our worldview to the point where we can cope. By admitting it to ourselves and by understanding why we do it, we can work with it. Little bit by little bit. As I've said in numerous videos, we titrate. We go a little bit out of our survival state, we go back in. If something new comes into our life, listen, take it on board, put it into a safe little package, bring it back into your survival state and look at it. You work with things. You don't make decisions when you're pushing yourself out of your survival state, because inevitably they're just reactions. You take the new information and you sit in your survival state and you teach your survival state how to work with new information. You teach your survival state how to broaden your view that little bit more. How to a way of lessening the severity, I guess, of the threats and how we perceive all these potential threats, of lessening the aggressiveness of our filters. Now, in the next two videos, I'm going to touch on two, they're going to be a little bit button pushy components of this narrowing of our worldview. But in this first video, I just wanted to get you guys to understand how necessary it is to be aware of the habits you have that feed your defensive structures, that feed your coping structures. Not challenging them, not throw them away, and please do not perceive that they're wrong. They're not. They're what you need to do everything you need to do every day to survive. But we need to understand them so that we can work with them, so that we can start to amend them and grow them into ways that work a little bit better for us each day. As always, I love your guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time.